Come on in.
Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you for inviting me to be here, and thank you everyone for being here, especially my other fellow traveler friends from other meetings. If you've heard my story before, I hope maybe you'll hear growth today. I'm Holly. I'm an adult child, and I have been in ACA, this wonderful program, full time for over 3 years. I also have been sober in another program for over 40 years, and I'm a very grateful recovering adult child. Um, I brought some friends with me. First of all, I wore my turtle t-shirt for my little girl today. This is her favorite t-shirt. Um, when I was little, my favorite story was the tortoise and the hare. I identified with the tortoise because I had two older sisters and they were always faster and smarter. And, I would plod along and eventually get there. This is my little girl. This is little Holly. And this is this is Teen Holly. Oh, gosh. I live in Southern California. I live in a beach city called Dana Point. And um, I grew up in San Francisco, a suburb of Boston, Massachusetts called Wellesley, and Laguna Beach, California. My dad was a naval officer and we moved a bit. My parents met during World War II. The hotels in San Francisco had the big bands in to play to entertain the officers when they were in town. And my mother was a hostess. They'd have the young single women, be there to dance with the officers and party. Well, my mother danced with my dad and they fell in love and they eloped to Reno. And their marriage was kind of that way, a lot of drinking and excitement, and also a lot of misunderstanding, arguments, um, undealt with resentments. They fought a lot. Uh, my two older sisters had different roles. My oldest sister would fight with my dad, and she was a real overachiever, um, great student, athlete. I guess she was the hero. And my middle sister was the loner. She isolated and rarely interacted with the rest of us. Her way of dealing with the dysfunction was to just vanish. And then I was a combination. I was the mascot. I found that I got a lot of love and attention by being funny. And I also was the really good one. I watched my oldest sister get in trouble when she fought with my dad, and I was afraid of him. When I was little, we had gone to the beach and he got a stick. And when we got home, he sat us down and he said, you know, this is my stick. If you don't behave, I'm going to hit you. So I learned to fear authority. About that time, one morning, my sister told me that my dad had hit my mother, and my whole world just crushed. My father hit my mother. I couldn't trust him, and I didn't feel safe. And there was nobody to talk to about those feelings. When I was in kindergarten, I was at an experimental elementary school in San Francisco, and this education students at the college would test us and observe us. And they pulled me aside for a study one time, and they showed me pictures of happy faces, and then there were sad faces, and they'd ask me to pick one, and I would pick the sad one. And I think that was sort of the first time my higher power kind of helped me realize that, something was wrong. Um, that um, all the other kids chose the happy one. Something was going on. And then in fourth grade, I was really depressed. We had moved back east, and I would hear my dad drunk arguing with my mother every night. He'd be throwing things, threatening her life. One night he left a noose on her pillow. She'd hide in my sister's closet. Um, and uh, what was I going to share about that? Um, oh, so I was in fourth grade and I was just really, really depressed. I stayed home from school a lot because I was so depressed. Um, and my mother took me to see the doctor, and he prescribed antidepressants for me. This is fourth grade. And antidepressants were brand new. She doesn't believe in pills, and they were very expensive. So after I think 2 days, she didn't see improvement, and she took me off these pills. Depression was part of my life for most of my life, and I believe that was unexpressed anger and grief eating away at me. Um, so when I was 14, I started to drink to help me um, be happy, to help me forget about what it was like in my family, this insanity and chaos every night, and then pretending in the morning like everything was fine when I went to school. When I drank, that critical parent in my head was shut down. I didn't hear her at all. I felt like I was pretty, like I was fun, um, like people liked me, like I fit in. And so I drank to get drunk from the time I started drinking at 14. I did go to college. I went as far away from my family as I could. They were in Massachusetts. I came out to California, and I didn't have the skills to form friendships. I was all by myself. I would sit alone in the cafeteria of the dorms, and it was just a very lonely, painful time for me. I ended up getting ill. I got infectious mono and had to withdraw from the second quarter. But really, it was an ACA bottom where I just had no purpose in living. I didn't know who I was. I thought I was the worst person that ever tread the earth. My feelings didn't count, so I didn't know what they were. I just stuffed them. And while I was out recovering from that illness, I changed my major and got real energized. And I flipped from the depressive side to the excited side. I was on a mission. I wanted to be a TV news broadcaster. And so I worked really hard in school, and uh, I did okay as long as I had marijuana or alcohol, to shut down the critical parent. Um, I got a career in sales. I didn't become a TV broadcaster. I got a career in sales after college, and I was out drinking one night and got a DUI. I spent the night in jail. And I tried to tell them, you don't know who I am. I'm Holly. I'm good. I don't belong here. It was a real eye-opener for me. I came out of my denial about my alcoholism. And that night I vowed I'd never drink again. I stayed sober on my own without support for 9 months. And then I started drinking again. And uh, it escalated. I drank another year, and then I, um, I was forced to get professional help by my boss. They were going to fire me, but I was crying, and they said, if you get professional help, we won't fire you. So I went to treatment, and I had my spiritual awakening. A higher power is really important to me, and I respect and honor that some people struggle with higher power. For me, it's not a religious higher power. Um, Good orderly direction is more of a better description of what my higher power is. Um, um, in I started taking the steps in the other program and found that when I asked my higher power for help, I got it. And so I continued to do it, and I continued to get the help and guidance I needed. So they fired me after I got treatment, and I got a new career as a paralegal in the legal industry. And in that field, I practiced my workaholism. I found that by being a really good people pleaser, working long hours, um, working weekends, nights, being the best, I got a lot of approval. I desperately needed that outside approval because I couldn't give it to myself. I hadn't learned how to give myself love and acceptance and approval. So, after a long career in that field, I started hitting a bottom my last 2 years of working where my body was just giving out. And I was tired of always being the only one who'd be working nights or weekends when everyone else was off having fun. And I just remember asking my higher power to help me, help me. And what happened was they agreed to let me work part-time my last year before retiring. That helped a lot. I only worked 20 hours a week. And at the time, I started talking to a woman in the other program who's also a therapist. And she kept asking me about my um, about my parents, my family of origin. And I kept trying to blow her off because when I was 2 years sober, I had hit a real bottom, a depression, and had gone into therapy and had worked through my family of origin issues. So I thought, I did a lot of crying. I had a good insight on what it's like to be a child who grows up in an alcoholic family, and I was good. That's all I needed. So it was really bugging me that she kept, well, what about your father? And then one day she said, by that time she was my sponsor, and she said, well, I'm starting an ACA meeting. Would you like to come? And being the people pleaser, I said, oh, yes. Really, it was the last thing I wanted. But she and about 8 other women were starting an ACA meeting. So they they shared the laundry list with us. And I identified with most of the items in the laundry list. And I loved it. It really caught my attention. Um, And then we started reading the daily affirmation, and those readings are so good. I read every morning the daily affirmation, and then I go to the associated page in the big red book. There was one recently that said, "We are like fish swimming through the lives of other people." In a, in the way that I try and gain favor and approval from others by getting in their head and knowing what they need and meeting all their needs and living their life instead of staying with me. I'm in their world. Um, And I started reading the Big Red Book. I just love the Big Red Book. It was just all so eye-opening. And at long last, I had clarity and understanding on why I always felt different, why I felt like I didn't fit in, why I was a loser, why I was so critical of myself, always thinking I was unattractive and stupid, and a failure at life. I've heard so many people share like everybody else got the rule book for life and they didn't. That's how I felt. And so the more I read, the more I um, got involved in ACA. I moved over to Zoom meetings when the pandemic struck and bounced around a little bit to find a home group where I felt safe and I heard recovery. And that's a daily affirmation meeting. And then um, I think I probably got resentments there and moved over to another daily affirmation meeting and got involved in service. Um, I started working the ACA 12 steps. The first workbook I did was the laundry list, the traits. And then I did the ACA steps. Um, and and I shared it with my writing with a fellow traveler. And I've had fallings out with fellow travelers. It's okay. Um, I find another one. God always puts someone in my path. And if I don't have a particular fellow traveler, I just reach out to other friends. I definitely don't have a sponsor in ACA because of my fear of authority and my people pleasing. It just doesn't work for me. I'm very uncomfortable with it. Um, so let's see. So I worked the ACA 12 steps and starting appreciating what abandonment meant in my life, that my parents were emotionally unavailable to me, um, and also sometimes physically available. They were going through their own illness with their alcoholism, and did the best they could. And I know my parents loved me, and my mother continues to love me with all her heart. Um, so the abandonment was really, really helpful. And I find that the exercises in the ACA 12-step workbook and the Loving Parent Guidebook are so helpful in evoking and eliciting the grief. So much of it is shut down and locked away. But by going through those exercises and answering those questions, it comes back little by little. And I was able to start the grieving process first by just remembering so many painful incidents and writing them down and sharing them and crying about them. And then moving on, uh, looking at the behaviors and the abandonment. It's just so healing, so very healing. I don't think it really matters what order a person uses the tools. For me, it just happened to be that order after the ACA steps. I did the Tony A steps and then the Loving Parent Guidebook. That's just the way it unfolded for me, and it flowed really well for me. Someone else might take a different approach, um, and that's okay. Another pearl in the Big Red Book is that ACAs come from all different kinds of dysfunction and background. What we share in common is that we fear authority, we have difficulty expressing our feelings, and what's the third one? I'm having a senior moment. Um, Fear authority, trouble expressing our feelings, and we're people pleasers. That's the third one. Uh, what was so profound for me in the Tony A steps were the ones that talk about loving myself. In step 3, I make a decision to practice self-love. A decision. I'm going to practice self-love. I'm not going to beat myself up. We became willing to open ourselves to receive the unconditional love of our higher power. I'm not going to buy into the notion that my higher power is disapproving or critical of me. No matter what I do, my higher power loves and accepts me. And so in the next step, why can't my loving parent give that to me, to my inner teen and my inner child? And then we continue to take personal inventory and to love and approve of ourselves. So that's my challenge on a daily basis, is to practice these principles, self-love and approval. When I catch myself listening to critical parent, thank my critical parent for trying to protect little Holly. Thank her for the great job that she's done my whole life by helping me survive a dysfunctional family. And let her know that loving parent's in charge and that loving parent has a different opinion. The more loving and accepting I become of Holly, the more loving and accepting I become of others. And it's enhanced my relationships. My my husband was thrilled when I first came to ACA because I quit managing his life as much. I say as much. I'm a good manager. I'm very responsible. Um, but I finally got off his back and let go of a lot of the control. So he was thrilled with that. But then when I started expressing what I was feeling, he wasn't so happy, to have to look at that stuff. I'm blessed with a husband in recovery who has the willingness to work through and talk about things with me. And uh, it, it's worked out really well. For when I was in my workaholism, I was convinced I wanted a divorce, that he was a loser. I regretted marrying him. Um, uh, it was a dark place and I felt that way because I was getting all my love and approval and acceptance from my employers, from the people I worked with. And the more I got there, the more contempt I had for my husband. So I I was able to turn that around and to see him for the man I fell in love with, and to focus on the parts of his character that are so fabulous, and to practice um, not managing his life, letting him manage his own life, uh, make his own decisions, and and ask if he wants suggestions rather than just offering it. That's probably the hardest thing for me, being in 12-step programs. Well, the other program, you know, we we share our experience, strength, and hope with others. And it's so tempting to give advice. Well, yeah, I went through that, and this is what I did. You might want to think about that. To wait and ask for people to ask for help. That's what I'm trying to move towards these days. Is to not just force experience, strength, and hope on people. So yeah, after the Tony A steps, I did the Loving Parent Guidebook with a fellow traveler. And now today my program consists of I'm in a once a week Tony A step study. I'm in a Loving Parent Guidebook study group once a week. And I also attend the daily affirmation meeting a few times a week. And that works really well for me. I'll just close by sharing where I'm at today. I listened to Claudia Black speak the other night and just got so much out of it. And one thing she suggested is every day to ask yourself, what did I do today that I would not have been able to do a few days ago? So I added that question to my little template I use for daily 10th step inventory. And what I did was I broke the don't talk rule by posting on Yelp a negative review of my husband's neurosurgeon. My husband developed infection and almost died 3 times last year following his spine surgery. And the neurosurgeon refused to take any responsibility and do anything about it. So we had to go to a different hospital and a different neurosurgeon to get it resolved. And he was in ICU on his deathbed. He made it. So I posted, that was December. I posted the review this week, and I just shared how he failed my husband by abandoning him in essence and denying that he had any responsibility. And I was so scared that I was, the other foot was going to drop. I was just so scared by challenging authority and speaking my truth. But I put it up there, and I'm getting all these calls from his office now wanting to talk about it. He wouldn't. The doctor in charge of the ICU where my husband was reached out to the neurosurgeon to figure out how to approach care. He wouldn't even return the call. He was nowhere. And so um, I'm letting adult Holly deal with the situation by not immediately calling back and being a people pleaser. I'm just going to write back and say, the facts speak for themselves. I don't care to discuss it, but here's a couple more things that happened that are unprofessional and very disappointing, and let it go. So thank you all so much for being here today and listening to me. I learned from all of you, and I love ACA. Thanks for letting me share.